We've got a big night tonight here on Court TV Live. I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us. And our coverage of the Ahmaud Arbery shooting has expanded several months now. All year long, we've been on top of this story every time something happens. And it's been sort of unpredictable from the beginning, from some of the people involved, how long it took for charges to come forward. And now we're at the point where we've got defendants charged with felony murder trying to convince a judge to be released from jail until the trial. Well, this is a bond hearing, but it's a bond hearing unlike most that you're going to see, because we've got lots of witnesses, lots of evidence, and today was just day one. But it was a very emotional day for Ahmaud's mom as she spoke inside the courtroom to let the judge and the world know what it would mean to her if these men were released. Let's take a listen.
For him, no matter how he maneuvered, no matter how fast he ran, or how quickly he turned, these men refused to let him go home. They should not go home now to prepare for their defense, to enjoy their children and grandchildren, and to be embraced by the community. These men are as dangerous today as they were on February the 23rd of 2020. It is not fair for these guys to even get a pretrial release, even for consideration. They cannot go home. In the name of justice, decency, and fairness, please keep these men behind bars until they can answer for what they did. And I also want to ask the courts, Ahmaud wasn't allowed to go home. Ahmaud wasn't even allowed the chance to live. He was denied all of that.
Incredibly emotional. And, you know, for her, think about the whole journey that this case has taken and how long it took just to get an arrest. And now she's at the point where you've got felony murder charges against the people accused of killing her son, trying to get released. They're presumed innocent under our system of justice, but the judge has a very difficult decision to make. And that decision was not made today because the hearing did not conclude. Let's bring in Court TV crime and justice reporter Julie Janae, who's at the courthouse in Brunswick, Georgia, and Court TV special contributor Ashley Banfield as well. Julia, let me start with you. Where exactly are we tonight? What happened today?
Vinny, we ended on that poignant moment that you just showed of Ahmaud Arbery's mother. We're at the point where the judge said, look, I wanted to wrap things up today, but he's sending everyone home to come back tomorrow. He did not make a decision on bond, though he has heard from all of the parties, including the defense teams for Gregory McMichael, Travis McMichael, and the state's evidence that they have saying that bond needs to continue to be denied. Tomorrow, he'll listen to any rebuttal evidence, hear any more arguments that may be outstanding, and then we expect that he's going to make that ruling. But he also has 3 other motions that he listed today that have not been heard yet, so they'll continue to move forward, hoping to wrap this up before the weekend.
You know, Ashley, when you look at this case and what's at stake here and what the judge has to decide at this moment, you know, on the one hand, you have criminal defendants that have no history, that have ties to the community. The risk of flight and the danger to the community is debatable. I think both sides are making arguments there. And then on the other side, you have the high-profile nature of this, and you've got the emotion that we just saw. So this is not going to be an easy decision for the judge.
No, but I'm not so sure that judges should be taking into account the emotion of a community when you're talking about men who are presumed innocent until otherwise. And that's just the hard reality, as uncomfortable as that might be for anyone listening who feels that they don't deserve bond. I mean, bond is there for people like the McMichaels, whether you like them or don't like them, whether you like their Facebook posts or their texts or you don't like them. And those were pretty unlikable things that, came out in court today, in their social media and their texts. They're very racist stuff. But, the other thing I think that's important when you look at Travis, the younger McMichael, is that he has a 4-year-old child. So it's one thing to say I've got ties to the community and I've rescued people as a lifeguard and I've served in the service. Those are all great things, but they don't stop you from saying, but I don't want to go to prison for life. But your 4-year-old son is something a little different, right? And he's not married to the mom, so they live separately. So it's not as though all of a sudden the whole family will have gone together. I think that does change the metric slightly for Travis, just in terms of weighing how much of a flight risk he might be.
Julia, Ashley mentioned the social media stuff, and that was another huge moment today. I'm going to play some of that testimony, but if you can kind of give us the context first. Zachary Langford is the man who's on the stand. Who is he, and what is the context of these text messages that we're going to hear testimony on in just a second?
This is a longtime friend of the defendant, Travis McMichael. He first was brought on by the defense to testify about the close ties that Travis McMichael has to the community, the fact that he said he will assist him if he is given bond and make sure that he shows up for court. So after giving that testimony, this happens on cross. That the prosecutor asks him about some messages. He first denies knowing anything about racially charged messages that he may have texted back and forth with Travis McMichael, but he then is shown the transcript of what the prosecutor was talking about.
So let's take a look at that part of the testimony now. We have a little bit of the context. And again, this is stuff that, there are bond hearings and then there are bond hearings. And that's why this one's just a little bit different. Let's watch.
I'll direct your attention, since you said you did not recall, to Facebook in a post on October the 17th of 2019. Do you recall Travis commenting on a photo that you posted and you said, quote, ha 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 ha, exclamation point, sayonara, you're. Do you remember that?
No, sir.
Do you by chance know what that post was that you put up, to which Travis McMichael replied with?
No, sir, I don't remember.
Let me ask you about some text messages between you and Travis McMichael, specifically November the 28th of 2019. Do you remember Travis McMichael texting you about shooting a crackhead with gold teeth and a high point .45? You remember that text exchange?
No, sir, I don't. Not.
You actually responded to it saying something about Newports and a 40. You remember that?
No, no, sir, I do not remember that.
Do you recall that text exchange between you and defendant Travis McMichael, in which he was talking about shooting a black with gold teeth that had a high point .45?
He was referring to a raccoon.
Okay.
No,
A raccoon with gold teeth and a high point .45?
it was being facetious. I mean,
To which you responded that this raccoon needed Newport cigarettes. Is that your testimony?
yes, sir.
That is an exchange between you and defendant Travis McMichael, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, not a great moment for that witness. Julia Janae, but let me ask you, have prosecutors specifically alleged, and I know there's no hate crime in Georgia, but anywhere in the arguments that they have made in front of the judge at any point, are they saying this was a racially motivated attack?
They don't use those words. They say, though, that it was used to determine what may have been the motivation that day. The detective who investigated this for the GBI, that's something that he said in his testimony in a previous hearing about the reason that they decided to go forward with arrests. It helped them to understand more about these defendants. So there were messages that were seen across the phones and accounts of the three defendants. We're specifically talking about Travis McMichael's background now. now, but those were moments in the overflow room where I was around the spectators who are mostly supporters of Ahmaud Arbery. They had a visceral reaction to that language that was coming from the witness stand.
You know, Ashley, it's obviously damaging. It does not help character. And certainly with this witness who's testifying, it undermines his credibility to a certain extent in the way he answered those questions. But ultimately, do you see this as a case that would be argued in front of a jury? It was a racial attack, and that is the reason they went after this young man who was jogging through the neighborhood because of the color of his skin.
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly in the climate that we're in today, I can see that happening. I think just we talked about this last night, Vinny, the results of the election, the Republican DA lost her job, and a Democrat won that election. And that's a really strong indication that moods are very different. And so, yeah, I could see that. But I think what's really critical here, first of all, it's so hard to listen to that stuff. And I'm sorry for Julia to have to listen to that in real time without the beeps, because it's very painful to hear those things. Our audience right now just heard beep, and it was really hard to know what exactly was said and just how ugly it is. So I'm going to characterize it best I can without breaking any rules here. I think it's obvious what one of the references was, which, this witness said was a raccoon and not something else with gold teeth. But the other reference was about Asian people and the direction of their eyes, and it was coupled with profanity, et cetera. So it's pretty obvious that a jury who might hear that would know exactly the heart of this defendant. But today, there were people on the stand who were brought in to say these are great guys. And you can't listen to something like this from Kurt Hall, who's one of the Coast Guard colleagues of Travis from back in the day, who defines himself as multiracial, who wrote a letter to the proceeding saying, in no way is Travis hateful to any group of people, or does he look down on anyone based on race, religion, and beliefs. Well, it's really hard to believe that, right? When you hear in real time and real audio the stuff that we heard before it went to the censors for the beep. So our audience might not have the full impact of that, but a jury would.
Oh, they will. That comes out in front of a jury. They're going to hear every single word. Let's take a listen to Greg McMichael, who's the father, his wife, who's also the mother of Travis. She testified today about the impact incarceration has had on her husband.
How does your husband compare physically to how he was in April of 2020? How does he compare now and appear to you?
Thinner, paler, weaker.
Well, let's talk about each of those. You say thinner. Are you aware of whether your husband has lost any weight in the 6 months he's been at the Glynn County Sheriff's
Yes,
Department?
ma'am.
How much weight?
About 45 pounds.
You say weaker. What do you see physically to explain how you believe he's
His
weaker?
body posture just looks,
You're going like this. Is that bent
yes,
over?
bent over, just body posture.
And you say his color is paler.
Yes, it is.
Are you aware of whether your husband, from the day of his arrest to today, has ever been taken outside
Yes,
since
ma'am.
he's been at the Glynn County Sheriff's Department?
He has,
When?
day before yesterday.
Is that the first time he was taken outside in the 6 months he was here?
Yes, ma'am.
The first time he saw the sunshine, the first time he got out of the jail?
It was raining.
All right, we have some videos, just kind of like a comparison here. Let's take a look at what Greg McMichael looks like today, and then we'll take a look at the booking photo. So that is him on the left side of your screen, the father, and that's kind of the after picture. So now let's take a look at the before, and that's him on the right side there. So I don't doubt that he's lost weight. Let me ask you, Julia, how different today were the arguments for father versus son, and how was the reaction of prosecutors? Was it any different for father versus son?
You know, these two arguments look different than they do in the motions. In the motion for Travis's bond, he listed all of his accolades and accommodations and things that he's done that were great in his past. And that's something we didn't see in the physical file. But when they called these family and friends of both men, you saw more coming from even Greg's side than you did in his motion, where you had people taking the stand talking about working with him and always knowing that he was someone professional who would have character, someone that they would put up their own homes for. Their landlord even said she was willing to let the home that they're staying in, she would let it be put up for bond in order to allow him to come home and be with his family where they are living right now, rent-free. Now, the prosecution, they really seem to have the same arguments about both. Now, with Travis McMichael, they were able to score some points in cross-examining his close friends because they said that he did enjoy fishing and hunting. And they said, does that mean that he would be able to live out in the woods? You say he has experience with that, maybe indicating that they think if he was a flight risk that he would be able to get away and live off the grid. But really with those witnesses who took the stand, the prosecution wasn't able to really shake them other than what we just showed with the impeaching of that one witness, but just able to show that these people were in support of them and may have reason to come and testify the way that they were.
You know, Ashley, Roddy Bryan, who's the third wheel here, right? He had a bond hearing and it was denied. And he's the one holding the camera. You know, there's been no indication or evidence that he had a gun. And he's in, you know, he joins the chase a little bit later. He doesn't instigate it. I can't see a judge allowing the guys with the guns to go home and the guy with the camera to stay locked up.
I think you're right. I will say one thing, and maybe Julia can correct me. I think there was some mention about a moment in in his camera work where it appears there might have been something, a gun that was reached for, but certainly nowhere does it indicate in any of the charging that the authorities, you know, are alleging that he was armed during this incident. But, you know, you can be armed with a vehicle because that could be a deadly weapon as well. So, no, I think you're right. I think the fact that they came down hard on Roddy is pretty indicative of where the mood is of the court right now. By the way, I think it's really interesting as well, and this speaks to the bigger story about this trial, that Roddy didn't want to be at these proceedings today, and his lawyer, you know, mentioned that to the judge, at which point the judge said, well, hold it, he doesn't want to even hear these things. And the lawyer said, well, gosh, yeah, if that's an option, he does want to hear them. So he came in via audio, he could listen in via telephone. But you know, I think they cited that he has maybe a health issue and he might have to interrupt, but he didn't want to be on camera. That was articulated. And I think that speaks a lot to the situation these three find themselves in with regard to the zeitgeist today and the mood and the coverage and the, you know, the spotlight being on this, you know, on these proceedings. Maybe it was something medical. Maybe it was just, I do not want my image out there now. I don't need the jury ahead to feel one way or the other and associate it with my face.
Julia, what's in store for tomorrow?
Tomorrow they begin again where they picked up, maybe hearing from the judge first, a ruling on the bond. But there are those three other motions, one being the motion to depose Larry English. He is the homeowner of that unfinished property that Ahmaud Arbery was initially in and leaving when the McMichaels noticed him and began that chase. They also have a motion from the state. They want the court to separate the father and son and really examine them and make sure they understand that there may be a conflict of interest in how closely they are working together, and get a waiver from them so that they understand that if they're going to decide not to point the finger at each other and not even make plea bargains with the state over their case, that they can't bring that issue up on appeal. So there may be a lot that we have to get through tomorrow. We're thinking it may go into the afternoon, but it's really unclear. It was even uncertain today exactly how long these arguments would take.
All right, Julie Janae down in Brunswick, Georgia, thank you so much.